Yo, what's going on YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the New Jersey Devils. I know, it's a little bit of a solemn moment here for the New Jersey Devils as they are kind of riding high, but they had that loss, and it's one of those things where, listen, I'm actually cheering on the Devils a little bit. I hate that they're in the same division as the Islanders, but I'm kind of genuinely happy to see them doing so well. You know, this is a team that, you guys know the context. You know, the last time we talked, the Devils were playing quite well, and then all of a sudden, you know, adversity hits, and then they lose. Now the question is, how do they bounce back from that? Because I think, you know, and we're going to see tonight what happens for the Devils, but when I look at this team right now, this is a team that, again, is still fairly young, and they could still use that argument for maybe this season and, you know, probably not next season, but probably still this season. You know, they still have a lot of young core players like, you know, Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier. Okay, maybe he's a little bit older now, but he's dealt with a lot of injuries, so his actual games isn't that different compared to Hughes at this point. So when you look at a lot of those guys, you have some prove-it goalies like Vitek Vanacek, where you don't really know what you've got in him until he comes in. You know, there was a lot of guys that were looking to put their stamp on the team, and they've definitely done that this year. So obviously their 13-game winning streak came to an end against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I mean, I just watched well, obviously, first you see the fans throwing the stuff on the ice, and that, listen, guys, as an Islander fan, you will remind me of 2021 when the last game at Nassau Coliseum, the Islanders fans were throwing beers and stuff like that on the ice. I know. I wasn't a huge fan of that myself, but it is something that I will never forget that game. And for Islanders fans, that was the biggest game in Islanders history at, you know, really since I've been born in 2000. You could argue the Sean Bates goal, but they beat Tampa in the Eastern Conference Finals to send it to Game 7. It was a pretty critical game, not to mention the whole thing with the arena. So, I understand it. I understand the frustration because I look back and, I mean, the goals being disallowed, I mean, those were some phantom calls by the officials, so I understand the frustration there, and they probably should have won this game. It doesn't help that John Tavares scored, and you guys know how I am with him as an Islander fan, but still, they lost the game. Okay. But I think what's more important, and shout out, their last 3 home games have been sellouts. Just saying. 3 sellouts in New Jersey. They said New Jersey hockey was dead. Yeah, okay. They're doing pretty well over there in Newark right now. So they play the Buffalo Sabres tonight at 8 p.m. Black Friday night. Huge game for the Devils. I think this is a game that the Sabres have been kind of struggling a little bit. They have a lot of young guys, maybe a little bit of naivete. And there's a chance here for the Devils to kind of take advantage of that. And, you know, the Devils have always been the young team and the inexperienced group, but Buffalo is definitely that team now. You know, Owen Power, Dylan Cousins, you know, Casey Middlestead, all those young guys. You know, the Devils have a little bit of a leg up in that regard. This is a huge game for them because if they let this game, traditionally what happens a lot is teams like the Devils that they're very streaky, they'll win 13 and then they'll lose 5 back after that. Like they'll go on a 5-game losing skid after that 13-game winning streak, which doesn't make that 13-game winning streak a 13-game winning streak anymore, right? So you kind of look at it that way. This is a game that is, even looking ahead, you know, and you don't want to look too far ahead, but you do want to look ahead because if the Sabres lose this game, now you're 2 games down, and then you have 2 huge matchups in your division. You play the Washington Capitals at home, then you have to head to MSG, I want to say Monday. Yeah, it's Monday, the 28th. Those are 2 critical in-division games for the New Jersey Devils here coming up after this Sabres game. So you don't really want to be going to that game on a spiral of a 2-game losing skid. Can they get out of it at home against Washington? And that's going to be a big game for them. And it's not a game that I think they can, you know, they're not necessarily worried about, but the Capitals and Rangers are not playing that well. They're struggling. And if you're the Devils and you want to assert your dominance in the Metropolitan Division this year, those are two games that can really set you ahead and really kind of get this thing going back where maybe you're not on a 13-game winning streak every other game, right? And every other week you're not going 2 weeks without losing a game. But if you're winning 4 games and losing 2 the rest of the season, the Devils will do very well this year. So when you look at it in that sense, those 2 games are, traditionally they're called 4-point games, right? Because you have to look at it in the sense that a team like the Capitals or the Rangers, if they're trying to make ground on the Devils, let's say the Capitals win that game in regulation. So that's 2 points that the Devils aren't moving up in the standings, and that's 2 points that the Capitals are gaining on the New Jersey Devils. So that's why they call it a 4-point game, because not only are you not getting 2 points, but you're giving the opponent that is below you trying to nip at your heels 2 points closer to you. And that's why it's so, a lot of these games tend not to go to overtime, because they, if it's a 2-2 game with 5 minutes left in that game, both teams are going to be going, balls to the wall. They don't want to go to overtime and give a point to that opponent. They won't settle for that. If it's a game against Edmonton or Arizona, maybe the Devils are willing to, okay, let's be conservative, let's get this thing to overtime and steal a point. Not in those kinds of games. Not against Washington and not against the Rangers. That is the last thing you want, is to go to overtime, because now that win that you're hoping to get gets diminished a little bit. So that's why when I look at this thing, this is a big game, a big stretch here, this Thanksgiving weekend for the New Jersey Devils, because ideally you go 2-1 in that stretch. It's unrealistic to say they're going to win all 3. Ideally, you win all 3. But even if you go 2-1, let's say they win I think it's important that they win this Buffalo game and then leave it to the Washington and Ranger games to go 1-1. If they can split that Rangers-Capitals stretch here this weekend, I think that would be a very successful weekend for the Devils. But it's a big stretch for them. The good news is, too, most of their games up until the end of this year are at home. They don't have any road trips until January 10th when they go on a 5-game road trip. They don't have any big road trips till then. And the good news is their road games here, now again, these are big games because they're in the division, but from now until that 5-game stretch, January 10th, they play Buffalo on the road, 1 game. The Rangers on the road, 1 game. That's a bus ride for the Devils, so that's basically meaningless. Philadelphia is the next one on December 3rd. Again, that's a bus trip. The New York Rangers again on the 12th. So after this Buffalo game, between the 25th of November and December 20th, which is basically a month, the New Jersey Devils will not have to step on a plane, barring they get traded or something. They will not have to step foot on their private plane. That is how good their schedule is here in the end of November going into December. It's a critical stretch, though, because like I said, in that stretch, they played 2 games at MSG, 1 game in Philadelphia, and I almost said the Spectrum, but I held myself. They play 1 game in Philly, 2 games at the Garden. They go down to Carolina and Florida, a back-to-back on the 20th and the 21st in December. And then they go to Pittsburgh and Detroit. And those are all separate from each other. Like, they're not back-to-back. The only 2 games they have back-to-back on the road are Carolina and Florida right before Christmas. That is the only time they have to go on an airplane between after this Buffalo Sabres game till December 25th, which is Christmas, and even going into January. Like, they have a very good schedule. This is a critical stretch here for the Devils. And you look at those games on the calendar, right? Washington, the Rangers, the Flyers, the Islanders, the Rangers again, the Flyers again, Carolina, Pittsburgh, Carolina. So from now until New Year's, they have 9 games in their division. And like I said, those are a lot of 4-point games, which are critical for the Devils right now. And if they want to assert themselves at the top of that division and stay there, and everybody that's kind of saying, all right, clock's ticking, when are the Devils going to go on that 10-game losing streak? When's it coming? No, avoid that. Avoid that at all costs. And again, you want to be like, all right, we had the 13-game winning streak, but you also don't want to get too comfortable. You need a little bit of urgency there. And like I said, I mean, unfortunately for the Devils, it's going to hit them like a freight train at the end of this little patch, right? Because from January 10th until the 19th, in that 9-game stretch, they play 5 games on the road. Carolina, Anaheim, LA, San Jose, and Seattle. They're going to be all over the place in that second week of January. Then they play 2 games at home against Vancouver and Seattle, and then they go back on the road for 4 games. So in an 11-game, oh my goodness, yeah, so it's even worse than that. So let's take a look. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You have 11 games on the road of 15 games. So 4 games at home versus 11 on the road in a 15-game stretch. That is brutal. And that starts from, like I said, January 10th until February 18th. So for about a month and a week, so about 5 weeks, it is going to be hell for the Devils. Now, I don't think it's something they can't avoid, can't deal with, but injuries, kind of the winter blues, the mid-season blues, being on the road that long in January and February is difficult. So there's going to be a big spot here for the Devils right now. I think if they can get out, if they can get into that, that big road trip in January with this kind of record, top 3 in the division, realistically, top 3 in the division, I think the Devils will be okay. And I think they're going to have a real shot because, again, you want to look at, you're going to have some bumps and bruises. You're going to have maybe some struggles on those road trips. It's a young team still. You want to see them do well here. And I think right now is their opportunity. Shout out to Vitek Vanacek. He has been great in between the pipes, but again, if he loses 2 or 3 games, does he start to fall off and hit that bumpy patch? Again, you want to avoid all those things. So let me know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think of the Devils? I think the Devils are a very good team. Lindy Ruff, from what I've seen from the Devils, is they're just very dominant. Like, even that game they lost to the Leafs, I think a lot of Devils fans were mad at the officials because their team was playing well. They deserved to win that game. They just couldn't find a way to catch the breaks, and they were hitting the post a lot, shooting the puck from the goal line, shooting the puck from the top of the, in between the dots. They were from everywhere. They were able to, maintain puck control a lot. They have just played a level that I have not really seen since Lou Lamoriello was the GM there a while back. And that's not a shot at the Ray Shero era. It just didn't work. And I think that this team is playing a different level of hockey. They're a much faster, more skilled team, and that's what Tom Fitzgerald wanted for the Devils. But they are definitely thriving in that. And a team that looked a little bit discombobulated and some guys still growing like Hughes and Heishier that just weren't really developed, you can't say that anymore. This is a very developed team, and depending on what happens with Severson, maybe some changes to the blue line, Hughes comes in maybe at the end of the year from Michigan. This is an exciting time to be a Devils fan, and again, they've had 3 straight sellouts, which is very exciting for the Devils. A team that necessarily isn't considered one of the big hockey markets, but they seem to be bringing in the crowds right now, and shout out to them right there. Guys, that is it for today's video. Guys, you know what? Real quick, I do want to give a shout out because things could get better for the Devils. There's been rumors. Again, we've heard these rumors before, but I figured I'd mention it here. Podcaster and former broadcaster Tony Marinaro said during a recent episode of the Sick Podcast that the Devils are extremely interested in trying to acquire Josh Anderson from the Montreal Canadiens. Marinaro even went as far as to say the Devils would be willing to part with a young player who isn't currently on their roster, listing off guys like defenseman Luke Hughes, Alexander Holtz, and Simon Nemec as candidates. So that is kind of interesting, and we've heard these rumors in the past. When Josh Anderson was on the trade block, this past spring, even last winter, the Devils were one of the teams that was very heavily involved in his services. So I wonder if that kind of churning and talk kind of continues here going into the new year, because I think the Devils are a team that would definitely consider that type of trade. It's a big asset, though. Again, Hughes, Holtz, Nemec, I don't know if I'd be willing to give them up necessarily for Anderson, but the Devils, listen, they might say, listen, this is our chance to set the precedent that we are going to try and win it now. We're sick of the future and this and that, so we're going to make a big, bold move. And that is definitely a bold move. But let me know what you guys think. Would you like to see Josh Anderson come to the Devils? And would you be willing to give up a Holtz or a Nemec or a Hughes? Or if you were willing to give up one of those guys, which one of them would you be most okay with losing in a trade? Let me know down below. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.